It is a well-known fact that the Bolshevik-led revolution and Lenin himself was originally assisted by the Germans who wanted chaos in Russia. But the true power of the Bolsheviks came not from their German allies, but from satanic magic and demons. The red star of communism was in fact a pentagram and gave protection to Red Army tanks and soldiers that had that emblem on their clothes or vehicles. The true test of the Soviet Union was the Nazis, who were protected in contrast by the swastika, an ancient symbol of the sun, light and prosperity. The demons that helped the Bolsheviks were paid for their assistance in blood, the blood of many Red Army soldiers. They dwelled in the spires and stars of the Kremlin, and today when you go up on the irradiated surface, be sure to avoid making eye contact with the Kremlin, lest you become hypnotized and lured into a building from which nobody has ever returned. The year is 2013, except instead of Nelson Mandela dying and Edward Snowden revealing just how immoral the American government is, instead the world devolved into nuclear war. All the major powers sent off their nukes and humanity was brought to the brink of extinction. But some managed to survive inside the subway systems of Moscow. Because of the Cold War, the Soviets built the metro to be like a fallout shelter, which is one of the few good things they ever did. If anyone could survive the apocalypse, it's probably the Russians. With the amount of vodka they drink, the radiation probably runs off them like water, and they are already friends with bears, so why would they be afraid of giant irradiated rats? Parts of Russia today could basically be called post-apocalyptic after communism, and yet they don't let it hold them back, and instead prove the saying that hard times create hard men. Compared to these Slavs, Western European men do often look like soy boys. I started reading this book because I recently watched the show Chernobyl. After that, I felt like consuming some more Russian or Slavic media, since they have some quite dank memes like dancing and squatting Gopniks, and quite an interesting culture for a Westerner like myself. The Slavs are different enough from us that they are quite interesting, but they're not too different that you could call it exotic or unrelatable. Anyway, back to the world of the book in question. The surface became irradiated and uninhabitable for humans. All sorts of animals have mutated and been irradiated into large monsters that prey upon man. There are also some dangerous anomalies that science and man cannot explain. Most people stay underground, living whatever life they can, surviving. The only things that can grow underground are mushrooms and moss, which are for the most part fed to animals. The diet of a metro survivor consists of mushrooms, moss, pigs, chickens, rats, and if you're really lucky, multivitamins. They also drink bitter tasting mushroom tea, and on Christmas, real tea if they are rich and can afford it. The people live for the most part in tents at various different stations which function as towns or city-states. There are all sorts of ideologies and ways that stations are run. There are greedy capitalists, Russian Nazis and half-starved communists. Beyond that, there's also a station of Christian monks, a station that adopted the Hindu caste system, some Muslims from the Caucasus, and a bunch of primitives with a made-up religion. And my personal favourite for an anecdote, a station of Satanists that turn travellers into slaves to dig endlessly in a great pit, trying to unite the cultists with Satan and bring hell into the metro, as if it wasn't bad enough there already. This book inspired a pretty enjoyable video game series, and in turn received quite good book sales after the success of those games. It would be silly to compare a video game with a book, but I'm gonna do it anyway. All of my favourite parts of the book, the bits that will really stick with me, you cannot find in the video game. The short little stories and scenes which ignite the imagination, and at the same time with things you would not have imagined yourself. Where the video game makes you feel like a badass killing hundreds of enemies, humans and mutants by yourself, the book, in stark contrast, has a much more realistic main character. A main character who struggles and suffers and doubts, like many a young man in his situation would. Our hero, the young 20-year-old Artyom, has never left his home station, but fate sent him on a journey across this vast and varied underground world to deliver an important message about a threat to his home station and possibly to the whole metro. While it might have taken an hour to get from one side of the metro to another before the war, After the war, a journey like that could take days or weeks with all sorts of obstacles, man-made or otherwise. The threat that our hero's home station is facing is the Dark Ones. They are called that because they have black skin and because they are mysterious. They feel no pain, they have telepathic abilities, and the more exposure you get to them, the more depressed, psychotic, and scared you become. They can turn hardened soldiers into loonies, screaming, crying, shitting their pants, and running away from their guard posts. They are better adapted to the new world than the humans are, and they can live on the surface. These are not the only intelligent mutants. Another notable example are the librarians. Some of them live in the Great Library of Moscow, and just like real librarians, they hate noise. They are shaped like gorillas and are hairy like them too. They are very dangerous, but mainly in numbers or if you don't see them coming. These monsters can actually be stared down directly in the eyes, and they may back off and disappear somewhere else. Now, I didn't have to explain these two types of mutants to you for the sake of this review, but I just really liked the nuance of them and hoped it might help you to get interested in this book. Television, video games, and books are oversaturated with post-apocalyptic stories lately. Whether it's zombies, nuclear war, the ice caps melting, or any other Armageddon you can imagine, there must be a reason. Why are we in our modern lives drawn to these depressing stories about a future that most people would not want to become reality? I think that the modern world drains us of that fire for life which animated our ancestors since time immemorial. Where they fought with tooth and nail to survive, we instead are offing ourselves in record numbers despite a number of people saying we're living in the best time in history. We live relatively comfortable, easy lives. We have too much free time and jobs that seem meaningless and which few people can enjoy. Where our ancestors had to struggle for their lives every day, we can sit back, eat sugar-laden food, jack off to pornography, and live in virtual worlds instead of in the real one. I think the people that like this apocalyptic media aren't just there for the drama that can be found in any other TV show. I think on some level they long for a life without technology, where life is more natural, where life is more dangerous and thus more valuable for merely existing. Also the fact there's a lot less than 7 billion of us still alive. Where people live together as actual communities united for survival, instead of as atomized, divided individuals. I rate this book 10 out of 10, and I should retroactively give my previous review of Hereward 7 out of 10, so that giving this book a 10 really means something. The only thing I would complain about is the quality of the paperback edition, which probably can't be helped, so I won't bother. There are scenes and creatures and concepts in this book that will stay strong in my memory for a long time to come. It's quite amazing then that this book was written by Dmitry Gopnik, who was only 18 at the time. He put the book up on his website for free, and 3 years later it was put into print. He's quite an interesting guy. He's not only a writer but also a journalist and a radio host, and he's worked for all sorts of European news channels and been to all sorts of places like Chernobyl and Middle Eastern war zones. Anyway, if you've gotten this far, thanks for listening to our longest book review yet. I wanted to make sure that I truly gave this book its time of day and got you interested in thinking about buying it. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, give the video a like, and share it with your friends if you want to see more content from this channel.